Today's event is all about building connections, networking, and mentorship. Our first panel of the day is on the power of woman-to-woman mentorship, how to build successful relationships. And it'll explore the profound impact of mentorship among women and the strategies for nurturing successful mentorship relationships. I also get to moderate this panel. I'm grateful to be in front of you and have the opportunity to do that. And I promise the rest of the remarks from me today will be limited to bios of introducing women. Our panelists bring diverse perspectives and experiences to the table, promising an enlightening discussion on empowerment, support, and shared growth. Let's dive in and discover how woman-to-woman mentorship can inspire and uplift all of us. So please welcome with me as I introduce each of them. Please feel free to take your seat on the podium here, or on the dais. Sonali Allen, Senior Vice President, Chief Compliance and Community Development Officer at Mercantile Bank. You can applaud. Sonali is responsible for the bank's compliance activities for all regulatory requirements and for developing and implementing their community economic development programs, which have contributed nearly $11 million in grants towards affordable housing efforts across the state. Lysandra Gaddy, President and CEO of Grand Rapids Community Foundation, Michigan's oldest community foundation. In her role, she guides the Community Foundation's staff and Board of Trustees in their fundraising, grant-making, and community leadership efforts. And Kristen Williams, Vice President of Customer and Digital Technology at Meyer. Kristen is responsible for all customer-facing technology like their website, app, and M-Perks loyalty programs, as well as digital data and analytics. As a volunteer, she works with the Girl Scouts of America, focused on technology, and also gives her time to First Robotics, serving as a lead coach of a Lego robotics team. Welcome, ladies. This is where we test to make sure all of it works, right?
Does it work?
Yeah, it
Test.
does. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us today. You are an incredible group of women that have lots of diverse perspectives, but also you have a rich history and experience in mentorship and the kind of things that can come from women-to-women relationships. I'd love to jump into a few questions, and if we have time at the end, we will open it up to audience questions as well. There is a microphone that's at the front. When we do this, there is a microphone that's at the front, so if you make your way to the front, if it's convenient for you to do that. We also have someone running with a microphone when the time comes, okay? Our first question is gonna start with Lysandra, and please don't hesitate to jump in if you have follow-up responses. Can you share a personal story or experience that highlights the impact of woman-to-woman mentorship in your life or career?
I'm gonna go off the rail for one real quick second, because Sonali told me to do it. If you see a gold earring hoop, I never wear gold, and the day I wear gold, I lose my first pair of gold earrings.
That's right. So
So you, does somebody have it?
Shut up, let's go. Thank you.
There we go.
Okay, so, can you repeat the question?
I'd be happy to repeat the question. Can you share a personal story of experience that highlights the impact of woman-to-woman mentorship in your life or career?
Yes, when I ended up in banking, I call myself a recovering banker, and I ended up in corporate banking for 15 years. And I remember two mentors, because one followed me almost throughout my career, even when I went into nonprofit work. India Weekly and Michelle Shangra, and I call their names out. And Michelle worked at Mercantile and worked with me both at Chase Bank, NBD Bank on Chase. And India was the first Black female mentor that I had that was in a senior vice president level, and at the time I was an assistant manager, and they saw things in me, both of them, that I couldn't see in myself. So India I didn't ask India to be my mentor. She told me she was going to be my mentor. and I so appreciated that, because one of the things that she provided me was knowledge of when to move, or knowledge of when to really dig in, because sometimes we're in a position where we want to apply for the next role. And she would say, tell me, nope, it's not time. Keep finishing this work because you're about to knock it out the park. So when the next one come up, you can ask for more because your numbers are just out of the park. And so that's what I did, and I kept going from branch to branch, not as the assistant manager, but taking over some of the largest branches that, at the time, it was Chase Bank, that they had. And being in that role, both of them, who actually brought me in, thank you for the ring, brought me in, and I ended up moving into business banking. So long story short, both of them invested in my careers in ways that alone I would not have been able to. They were able to not just, they didn't tell me what to do, but they helped set a path for where I can go, and then they charged me to do it. So when it was, for instance, business banking, I never thought I wanted to be a commercial banker. I wasn't supposed to be in banking for more than 6 months, and I ended up there for 15 years. And that is truly the power of mentorship. So when I left as a banking teller, I finished as the vice president in private and trust services. I've been a loan officer. I've been a commercial training, and Chase is one of the largest banks in the world. And so I even had an opportunity to change a system corporate-wide, not just in the United States, but across internationally. So that's what that mentorship afforded me the opportunity to do. And they really did help see myself as a fierce, coachable, teachable, and listen leader, because there's sometimes you have mentees that do not heed some of the advice that mentors are giving them.
Thank you for sharing that story. Amazing story. Ladies, any of you want to follow up on that?
You know, I reached out to my mentor, or who I thought was my mentor for years, and you're probably going to know her, Francine Gaston, right? Francine, so I think when I got into the banking industry, and I'm still addicted, she's recovering, I'm still in it. Maybe there's hope, but I reached out to her and I thought about the reasons why I used her as a mentor, and that's really because when I got into the industry, there wasn't that many people of diverse backgrounds, right? So it was hard to understand how to navigate this corporate banking culture. And Fran, that's the part that Fran helped me with. The part was how to communicate, when to draw the line, when not to draw the line. Those were all those little subtle things that you just don't know, and you need to find that one person that you can reach out to honestly have a conversation.
The only thing I would add, Karen Ann Terrell, who was my CTO at Walmart, and I had just come back from maternity leave. I was up for a huge promotion, and my head was like not in the right place. You know, like I was a month back from having my first child, and I had interviewed, and apparently it didn't go well, which I wasn't surprised. And so she calls me in, and she's like, "Listen, these bozos don't know what they're doing. You're the person for the job." She's like, "You'll be fine." And I'm like, "But I still need to interview, right?" She's like, "Oh yeah, you have to keep interviewing." She's like, "But then I'll just make the decision." And I'm like, "Okay." But she so often would pull me in and just tell me like, "No, now is the time for you to believe in you." Because at times she believed in me more than I believed in myself, and I needed that. And so sometimes they tell you when to dig in, sometimes they know how to push you out of the nest also. And she really did that for me in ways that, I mean, even I just got ready to take a new job, or she called me and she's like, "I have like 3 jobs. If you want one, just tell me and I'll call the people." And I'm like, I think I'm good right now. And she's like, "Well, what are you doing next?" And like, I haven't worked with her for more than like 7 years now. And she just called me. She's like, "We need to talk. Like, what are you doing with your career?" Because I think it's like those true mentors who are invested, they're with you probably forever. It's not just like a moment in time.
Thank you for that. get the empty nester, not empty nesters, but bird launchers, right? All of us. Sonali, this next one is for you. And, each of the women on this stage has been a mentor or in a mentor role before. But what do you get out of investing your time in another person, investing your time in creating a strong mentor relationship?
I think we often think of these relationships as a one-way street, right? The mentee receives and the mentor gives, but really it's mutually beneficial, right? Everything that I talk to a mentor, there isn't a skill that I've totally developed, right? I'm just reinforcing skills that I am talking to them about. The leadership skills that you develop in talking to a mentor, the listening, the being diplomatic. That's one of my challenges, learning to be diplomatic. All of those are skills that I can transfer into the work environment, into my team, into my group, and even at a corporate level. And I think that's where we kind of miss the mentor-mentee thing. We're all learning, and we learn from our mentees. And the other part was the networking part, right? I think that was how we started this morning. We develop blind spots, I think, when we're in our careers for a really, really long time. And we also don't network with people outside of our normal day-to-day world because, to some extent, we are on autopilot on a given day. And I think the mentee allows you to see some of your blind spots as you're navigating. You're seeing the world from their perspective a little bit, especially if they're younger. And it also helps you build your network of individuals, takes you out of your world into their world a little bit more.
Do either of you have a follow-up to that?
I think a really important thing, I think that the point of that's a bi-directional is so important. And I think seeking people out who are going to give you that reflection that you need, I think is super important.
I'm going to stay with you for the next question, and I'll ask, what are the key qualities to look for in a mentor or a mentee, regardless of gender?
So I do think that male mentors are important because they oftentimes have power. Right, and so you need those sometimes people who are in positions of power to also see you and to be able to reflect and speak for you when there is a vacuum, like if there's not somebody else in the room who can do that. So I do think that having male mentors is as important as female mentors because like it or not, they're still in lots of positions of power and you need that sometimes. I think that when you're seeking someone out though, I think that one thing that is really important is to know why you want to work with this person and to tell them that directly. I think so often I will have, young women come to my office and they're like, mentor me. I'm like, about what? Like, what is it that you want, right? Like, what is it that you need? And so I think that the thing to remember is the person on the other side of the desk is also just a person and they're looking for guidance also because I would hate to work with somebody on something that they don't need help with or that's not the primary area that they need support. And so I think when you are seeking out a mentor, it is really important to come in and be clear about what you're looking for. There have been mentors that I have had where I know this person is super, super high up. Maybe they're in the C-suite, maybe they have a very busy job, and I'm like, look, I'm looking for 3 months. I want to meet once a month, and these are the specific things that I would like to work with you on, because this is what I see in you, and this is what I would like to learn about from you. And so I come in, I am organized, I send her the stuff well before, 2 weeks in advance of our meeting, and when we come in, we are ticking. And that is super, super positive because even, again, one of the ones that I did this with, I haven't seen her probably in 15 years. She called me, a few days ago. It was like, hey, I need some feedback on this. So I don't see her often, but I talk to her regularly. And I literally didn't know her, didn't engage with her, only had that 3-month interaction with her as a mentor. But so sometimes you want that, or sometimes it's like, I want a longer term thing. I want to, I'm looking for a year and maybe we meet once a quarter or maybe we meet once a month. But you're telling them, I want to learn more about public speaking or I want to know how to strengthen my engineering skills or whatever it is. I think being really specific is super helpful because it puts the mentor in a position of knowing exactly how to lean in. And I think sometimes that gets missed.
Ladies, way to look for a mentor or mentee?
For me, when I took on my first CEO role, it was really important for me to look for someone who was leading a large organization or leading an organization that was much bigger than mine, that had more complexities. Even though my organization was a small organization, I saw in the future what the organization could be. And so I needed someone who can be a vision caster with me and walk alongside me, challenge me, push me when it was some difficult things and decisions that I had to make. And I gave them that permission to do that. But like you were saying, Kristen, it's important to be prepared and know. And that person preferred a more of an informal, they didn't want anything in advance, but know what I was going to be talking about and or the topics that we were going to be going over at that time. So because I knew that they had a very, very tight schedule, I was on it. And that was really important. This was a mentor for me within the last 7 years. And so it was incredibly important for me as I was restructuring the organization that I had someone that I can get some depth from. And male allyship is incredibly important. I've had also a couple male mentors, and it's really critically important to have that balance, as well as women of color. So it's nice to have someone who doesn't look like you, support you and give you things and feed into you and speak into you in ways that you may not be accustomed to.
Thank you for that. Sonali, I'm going to move to you for the next question. How do you identify the right mentor or mentee match for a relationship like this?
You know, I think it goes back to what Kristen said. What's your purpose in getting a mentor? Is it a hurdle at work? Is it trying to enhance your skills? I mean, what are you trying to accomplish? And when you start with what you're trying to accomplish with that mentor, then you can identify and start to pinpoint who are those people that can lead you to what you're trying to accomplish. Because, you know, it might be skills that you're trying to develop. So who in your work environment can enhance those skills? Who are you trying to be like? I think we've had this conversation a lot this morning, right? I want your job. So is it somebody else's job? Is that the right person? So that's how you pick that. And then for me personally, I was going to say, it's being able to connect with that person, right? Being somewhat authentic. Because if you're not honest or can't be honest with your mentor, then you're really not going to get the value and the benefit of that relationship. So the purpose, then finding a purpose that you can really finding the person that enhances that purpose for you, and then that person-human connection. You're not going to connect with everybody, but I think the connection is vital.
Other ideas about what makes a good match?
If you can't be yourself, then that's not the match. Like, it's hard to be able to know, like, how to pick one, but if you can't be yourself, then that's not the right person.
Terrific advice anywhere you go. Yeah. Lysandra, what are some common challenges of barriers that women face when trying to establish these kinds of relationships?
Fear. Fear is one. With the relationship that I mentioned to you before, because of who the individual was, I only shared it with a couple of my board chair for their confidentiality sake. But I almost backed out in asking because I was about to go against my own rule. I'm never afraid of the word no. And so, but all of a sudden I was like, shoot, what if they say no? And I was like, well, if they do say no, I have a backup. But if they say yes, it's a win for me. So fear is sometimes can hinder us and be a huge barrier for us. But we also sometimes feel like we don't have a large enough network. This is a network here, And there's so many networks within our community, women's-based organizations. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but women's-based organizations and individuals in your workplace. But we can't make the mistake that mentorship doesn't only have to happen in your workplace. Most of my mentors, I would say half of my mentors have been mentors outside of my current employer. And so sometimes they can provide a level of expertise and advice that you can't necessarily get inside internally because you're just a little bit fearful of being too honest internally sometimes. And I would say one final thing is that it's really important, and it goes back to what Kristen was saying, establishing a rhythm or a cadence with the person that you're seeking mentorship with. Go in knowing that, but being flexible enough to be able to meet with their schedule and your schedule and following through on that. So,
Others? Things that hinder?
I think fear is probably the biggest one, right? Being just nervous or fearful to reach out to that one person that you think is going to be the mentor for you, but you're hesitant. I think that's big.
I would just add, especially for women, I know I have this hang up personally, but I'm constantly worried about being a bother. And I'm like, oh, but they're so busy and they have all this other stuff on their plate and they've got 4 kids under 10 or whatever it might be. You know, I think it's both for networking and for the mentorship piece where I'm constantly worried about, I don't want to bother this person. And I think that this is still a problem for me like today, like this is a problem, so I don't have any like sage words of wisdoms about how to get over it. But I do think acknowledging it and then realizing that every time I've taken the risk, they have been just so grateful because they are also women who are seeking out connection. And so I think just if you have that hang up about bothering, just be flexible. I think like to her point, like make sure that you're like, hey, I'll work with you to figure out how this is. If we need to meet before work for coffee or whatever it may be, I think don't worry about being a bother. That's right, I tell myself.
if it's a 6:30 a.m. or 7 a.m. meeting.
Another thing I'm going to add to that is if the person says no, it might not be you. It might be their life circumstances, right? They just can't take one more thing. So that should not prevent you from looking for another mentor because their plate might be full, their journey, you're not walking their journey. So it's not you.
And good on them for having discovered how to say no, right?
Right.
Kristen, in your experience, what are some effective strategies for fostering trust and open communication?
So I believe firmly in transparency. This is how I like to work, it's how I like to lead. And I find that when you're just radically transparent, trust happens automatically because you're not having to worry about, well, what are they thinking or what are they hiding or whatever it may be. And also, like, I'm not ashamed. Like, what is it that I have to be ashamed of? I grew up being ashamed of everything. Growing up, in the South, and that was like, it was put into you is like, you don't bother people, don't be ashamed, like you're be afraid, right? And there's nothing I'm afraid of anymore. I guess it's my age maybe. And also I have a teenage boy, which you can't be afraid of him. It's scary, but they see fear. But I think just figuring out how to be, just how to be open and just be transparent. And I think that trust will come from that. And I think that when you are vulnerable, I think that we oftentimes, don't think about vulnerability. And then sometimes as women, we're like, oh, I definitely don't want to seem vulnerable. That actually vulnerability of your own challenges, I think really helps establish trust with others. It's an easy way to allow somebody to also be human, which I think, we're all just striving to be the best human we can be, so.
Other ways to build trust?
Follow through, right? Follow through in what your mentor is telling you to do. Follow through on the time commitments. That's, I think, a big one because that's just how trust is built.
And I would just add, I just had a friend who was mentoring someone and all of the meetings ended with like, I know that, I think I'm gonna go a different direction. And so if you have taken the time to seek the advice of a mentor and they are giving this time to you, just lean into a little bit of their advice. And if you have all the answers, then you don't need mentorship. So just know when you've asked someone for that time, give them the time, because trust is a two-way street. And so you have to trust their advice, but they have to trust that the time that they're giving to you, that you're going to, maybe everything they're saying is not for you, but take a nugget of what they're giving to you.
Now, Lysandra and Sonali, you both indicated that this next question was one, so I'm going to kind of jump ball for you guys, okay? How can mentees make the most of their mentorship relationships, ensuring they're receiving the valuable guidance? You've already kind of entered into that discussion, but maybe continue on.
I think I had a list that I thought through. Let's see if I can remember everything, or Alessandra can jump in. I think it's having a goal, right? What is the objective? I go back to, what is the objective of this mentorship, right? What are you trying to achieve? And then sharing that goal with your mentor to develop the plan that you want, whatever you want to accomplish. Think of that time frame that you want this to be. Is this a lifelong mentorship? Is this just a short term because you're trying to develop your skills? And then create that plan and then stick to the plan, right? Make this a priority, because if you make it a priority, your mentor is going to make it a priority as well. And then follow through on those commitments. Take notes. Do the things that you and your mentor spoke about. Like Lysandra said, don't say yes, yes, or no, you know what? I'm going to do that differently, because really that person has invested time in you. They're saying this to better you, or even if you've chosen to go another way, figure out how to communicate that the best, right? So those are some of the things. I can't think of everything that I had. Lysandra, you've got some thoughts here?
No, you covered it.
But it really goes back to your objectives. I really think everything goes back to, why are you seeking a mentor? And having a plan for that. Sometimes we fail to plan these things. We just think we want to mentor. We don't quite know the why or the plan for it.
It sounds like a common theme is go prepared, know what you want to accomplish together. Kristen, I'm going to head your way with this next one. What advice would you give to women who are seeking a mentor or looking to become mentors themselves?
I think if you are, I'll start with like if you want to be a mentor. I think that can sometimes be, again, we come back to this word fear, but it's like, do I have something to give? Like, do I find that I have some valuable thing that I think that I can impart? And sometimes it might not be as direct as saying, hey, I'm going to be your mentor, but it may just be, hey, I want to just kind of give coaching and advice or feedback. And it doesn't have to be a massively formal relationship. So I think if you feel like you have something to give, then you should give it. And it may not always be well received. I always say that feedback is a gift. Sometimes you keep it, sometimes you trash it. Sometimes you re-gift it. But I do think that finding people who are willing to give feedback, because I do think that, most male leaders struggle to give women feedback. I don't know if they're just afraid of us also. But I think giving feedback to women is saying, hey, I saw this in you and I thought that you did this really, really well. And here's the thing that I think maybe if you tweaked this part, it could be really, it could make it better. So finding ways to do that. And then if you are wanting to be a mentee, I think it's making yourself, it's taking that vulnerable step and saying, I'm looking for it. We actually hosted a mentoring mingle at my office the other day, and we did it kind of like speed dating. And so I think it was really fun, actually. We all got together and we mentored. Everybody had a name tag of what are they willing to mentor about, and then the mentees had something, this is what I am seeking out. And then at the end, everybody said, hey, here's who I would like, on both sides. And then we are matching them up on the back end. So sometimes it's like saying, hey, do we need to do something formal? I've also had assigned mentors, and it went horribly. Where this lady, eventually at the end of it, she's like, yeah, I really just don't like you. I'm like, cool, you've been my mentor for 2 years. This is not good for my career. We got over it sort of. But it's sometimes just seeking out others who are also seeking it. So do you have a group of people who are also wanting mentorship? I host mentoring circles at my office where there's several of us together. And I just started that because it's something that I did in my previous world. And now I have like 8 other leaders who are also hosting groups. So sometimes it may be how much time do I give back one-to-one, maybe a challenge, but if I can pull together 6, that can create a relationship and also those connections with those people. So finding like-minded individuals and going and say, hey, is there something we could do together? Or maybe we're just mentoring each other and building up our confidence. But I think that there are lots of different ways to go about it. It just depends on what you're looking for.
I'd like to change the tactic a little bit, and the segue was beautiful, to how organizationally mentorship is supported and the experiences that you might have had around that.
Organizational wise, so how organizations can incorporate mentorship?
Yeah, how can
Okay.
organizations and institutions support and
Yeah.
promote?
So there's a lot of large-scale organizations that have WIN networks, women inclusive networks, that are, Meyer has it, Amway has it, Gentex has just formed one, and those are really, really powerful networks where women can come together and support each other. But I also think it's really important that employers and organizations support community organizations that serve women, like Inforum, Women's Resource Centers in our community. Both of those organizations have established women-to-women networking opportunities and women-to-women mentorship opportunities. But I also think, number one, organizations have to simply invest in it. And so investing in us and investing in our ability to network, our opportunities for mentorship, but those are all super important, and investing can come in the form of forming an internal mentorship group, but also forming an external. I was a part of an external mentorship group, peer mentorship group, and it was, I was chief marketing officer at the time, and it was 4 of us at 4 different organizations. We met once a month for coffee, and we just shared best practices and things that we were struggling with. And so it doesn't have to happen internally, but you do want to seek out your employer to find out if they would support that. And they should be supporting those type of opportunities for us.
I think it's whether you have it internally or what the resources your employer provides for you to network outside and build mentors outside. I think even if you don't have a formal mentorship program, affinity groups are a great way of developing mentorships, right? At least if you participate in an affinity group at work, you can identify those women that are potentially going to be strong mentors for you. So whether there is a formal program or not, I think there are other ways that organizations support mentorship.
I'd love to open it up to some questions from the group today. Again, we do have a microphone at the front here, but we also have a microphone that we can run about if you need it. And it looks like we have a question right in front, so I'm going to give you mine.
Good morning. I'm just curious how you deal with the new generation who are working at home and who have not acclimated to coming into the office full-time, and I know there must be some kind of disconnect there. If you can address what ideas you're using to work with those young people who don't want to really come into the office but instead, want to work home.
Yeah, I think for those of us that have come in 24, every day, 8 hours a day, it is a challenge because you don't get the water cooler conversations, and there's so much that happens through water cooler conversations. I think one of the things we do is, it's not phone calls, everything is virtual, so we do make sure that everybody is on camera, because you can build a relationship to some extent if you're both on camera and you can connect. Even having the one-on-ones where you are constantly on camera with your employees or coworkers, I think that does help to, just kind of navigate some of those water what you're missing out in terms of water cooler conversations. I do think for all of everyone that loves to work from home, and we all do, there is value to coming in, right? So if you have the option, come in a few days. You connect with everyone else, you connect with leadership. If you notice, leadership in your organization is probably coming in more than they're working from home, right? How are you gonna make contacts and connections and talk with them if you're constantly at home? That's just what I put out there. But for supervisors, just try to get your employees on camera and have those one-on-one. I think the one-on-one is a lot more important now because you're not getting the social interaction at work.
I would just add too that after leading a women's-based organization, I do know that it's not just our younger generation, it's women and people from all walks of life that are choosing to stay home. And I worked with a number of employers that was seeking advice on how to bring those relationships back in, those team members back in. But I will say this, one of my mentors is in New York, and that's the only way I can get to him. And so that virtual relationship is really, really, really powerful. And there's times where we have an opportunity to come together in person. So if there's a relationship that works better for the mentor and the mentee, and it's a mutual, and you have those opportunities where you can come together in person, that's significant as well. But sometimes those situations can't be helped if you want to tap into that relationship.
Hello. Already, I have like 2 pages of notes. Nicole Wax from the Flint area. Thank you so much. Ladies up there on stage looking beautiful this morning. Kristen, I love what you said when you were asked, how do you find a mentor? And you said, find somebody you can be yourself around. And it's kind of hard because we're limited by who we know and who we're around, right? It's easy to find a mentor based on who you know and who you're around. So a personal experience, there was somebody, a male, who was further along in their career, very smart. I felt he was smarter than me, more advanced in his career than me. And I spent hours and hours and hours meeting with him. And I was very clear with my objectives. This is what I'm meeting with you about. And I had a very difficult time communicating with him, right? Very hard time communicating with him. And looking back to my younger self, it was like, oh, I should have moved on. I should have moved on because I could not communicate with him. So I thought that was a really good point of be yourself, and if that mentorship isn't working, move on. Especially now with all the different groups on social media and things like that. I'm from a smaller town, so we may have to search further and elsewhere and make a cold call. You know what I mean? Make a cold outreach.
Maybe that's the basis of, that's the basis of a great question. How do we find people that may not be people we know personally?
It's thinking about those skills you want to develop. Right. If it's technical skills, then who in your industry has those technical skills that you're wanting to develop, and then reaching out to that person. It's cold calling that person and say, hey, I admire you for these specific reasons. I'm wondering if you would have that time to mentor me. I'm trying to develop those skills. And who doesn't like to be told they're amazing, right? And that you look up to them. Like, at the least, you've made that person feel important, and they're gonna think about you even if they can't take you on right now. They're thinking about the fact that there is somebody out there that admires their skill set.
And that was the other thing I was gonna say, because a lot of us, sorry Kristen, pointing you out again, you mentioned, a lot of us feel the same way you do. I don't wanna be a bother, right? But who here feels like they're a bother when somebody comes to them with a very specific problem? No, we feel it's an honor when we can solve their problem. We like to solve people's problems. That's why we're all in this room to solve problems, right? That's why we're in the positions we are. We're CEOs, we're leaders, right? We're problem solvers. It doesn't matter how many problems are on our list to solve. We like to solve problems. So when people come to us in the right way and we're like, we have this very specific problem, can you help us solve it? We drop everything to help them solve their problem. So that should help put away our nerves of we're gonna be a bother, because if we approach it in the right way, they're probably gonna help us. And this just reminded me, I know somebody on social that I'm gonna reach out to, and I'm gonna be very specific and ask them if they'll mentor me, which I didn't think I needed a mentor in this until this conversation, so thank you again.
Thank you for
I was
that.
gonna say, ladies, too, it's also chamber, Rotary Club, you know, all of these inform, there's so many different opportunities that you have, even in rural communities, that you can tap into. Get, you know, push yourself out there to network so that you can make the relationships around mentorship.
We have time for one more, and someone's holding the microphone right now.
Hi, my name is Valerie. Thank you all for sharing your experience about being a mentor. One of the things that stood out to me, I currently do have a mentor. She's great. The issue is myself, because, well, I'll say like, all right, this week I want to work on this. And then by the time we meet, I'm like, now I want to work on this. Now this, now this. And so I was wondering, like, what advice do you have for the person who is a big dreamer, have all these ideas, but just need to like hone in on one thing, so I am utilizing my mentor's time to the best for her capacity?
I would say, you can only do so many things. Like, everybody's registry can only handle so many. So I really think that looking at your year, and I'm a big like yearly planner, and say these are the 3 things that I want to finish this year, not start. And I focus on it very much in that, what am I going to finish? And then the goal then is actually holding myself accountable to finishing versus starting something new, which I think is just a shift in the mental frame that for me was extremely helpful. So I want to finish this year, and this is the thing. And you know, we're never finished in developing ourselves, so I'm not saying that. But saying like, this is the thing that I want to say, hey, I put all of my time and my effort into, and I can feel that I have X amount of measurable improvement as a result. So I personally like to think about, what am I going to finish versus what am I going to start.
Great question, thank you. And thank you, ladies, for your incredible insight and incredibly valuable remarks today. We're so appreciative. Thank you.